The fluorescent lights of Bellamy's bistro hummed their usual tired song, a constant buzz that had become white noise after 18 months of double shifts. My feet ached in the cheap non-slip shoes, the kind that left blisters no matter how many Band-Aids I layered on. The dinner rush was finally dying down, leaving behind the wreckage of half-eaten meals and lipstick-stained wine glasses that I'd have to clear before Marco, the manager, started his nightly tirade about efficiency. I moved through the dining room like a ghost, invisible to the well-dressed couples who never quite made eye contact. That was fine. I preferred it that way. Being invisible meant fewer questions, fewer opportunities for mistakes, fewer chances that someone would notice the fraying hem of my uniform or the way my hands trembled slightly when I carried heavy trays. Exhaustion had become my constant companion, etched into the dark circles under my eyes, and the hollow feeling in my chest that no amount of sleep could fix. The scent of garlic and rosemary still hung heavy in the air, mixing with expensive perfumes, and the faint trace of cigar smoke that clung to certain customers, despite the no-smoking policy. I was wiping down table 7 when the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted, subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm. The front door opened, and Marco materialized from nowhere, his spine straightening with an urgency I'd never seen before. 3 men entered first, their eyes scanning the room with the calculated precision of people trained to identify threats. They wore dark suits that probably cost more than my annual rent, their movements synchronized and purposeful. Security. High-level security. Then he walked in. I didn't mean to stare, but even from across the dimly lit restaurant, he commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with his height or the obvious quality of his charcoal suit. It was something else, something primal that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Power radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer, invisible, but undeniable. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and when his eyes swept the room, I instinctively looked down, suddenly very interested in the water spots on my tray. Marco was already rushing over, his obsequious smile plastered on like a mask. "Mr. Castellano, what an honor. We have your private room ready, of course. Right this way, sir. Castellano." The name stirred something in the back of my mind. Fragments of overheard conversations between other servers, whispered warnings about certain customers who should never be kept waiting, never be questioned, never be looked at too directly. My hands tightened on the tray. I watched from my peripheral vision as Marco led the group toward the back of the restaurant, to the private dining room that was only open for VIPs, the kind of VIPs who made reservations through phone calls that Marco took in his office with the door locked. One of the security men held a small hand, a child's hand, and I caught a glimpse of a boy, maybe 7 or 8, with dark curly hair and a Spider-Man backpack clutched against his chest. Then they disappeared behind the frosted glass doors, and the restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. "Table 12 needs their check," Sandra hissed as she rushed past me, her own tray loaded with desserts for a birthday party in the corner, and "You're up for the next table that walks in." I nodded, forcing my feet to move, forcing my mind back to the routine. Bills to pay, rent due in 3 days, the electric company's final notice sitting on my kitchen counter. I couldn't afford to be distracted by dangerous men in expensive suits, no matter how they made the air feel electric. 20 minutes later, I was refilling water glasses near the private room when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the refined atmosphere of Bellamy's bistro. A high-pitched keening, rhythmic and distressed, followed by a crash that made several nearby diners look up from their meals. Marco appeared instantly, his face flushed. "Handle table 4, he snapped at me before smoothing his features and slipping through the frosted glass doors. But I had frozen in place, my body responding to that sound before my brain could catch up. I knew that sound. God, I knew it intimately. Had heard variations of it 1,000 times in my childhood home, in therapy waiting rooms, in the special education classroom where I'd spent my volunteer hours during college before everything fell apart. Another crash. The murmur of deep voices, one commanding and tight with a control that sounded like it was fraying at the edges. Then that keening again, and underneath it, barely audible, a voice counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward those frosted glass doors, even as every logical part of my brain screamed at me to stop, to mind my own business, to remember that I was barely holding on to this job as it was. I pushed through the doors. The private room was chaos contained within expensive walls. Chairs were overturned. A plate lay shattered on the hardwood floor, and under the large dining table, I could see the small figure curled into a ball, his hands pressed over his ears, rocking back and forth. The Spider-Man backpack lay abandoned a few feet away. Marco stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. The security men looked at each other uncertainly, clearly trained for physical threats, but completely unprepared for this. And then there was Castellano. He knelt beside the table, his voice low and urgent, trying to coax his son out. "Luca, come on. You're safe. It's okay." But there was something sharp in his tone, something that spoke of fear masquerading as authority. His knuckles were white where they gripped the edge of the table, and up close, I could see the tension in every line of his body. A man accustomed to control facing something that couldn't be controlled with money or power or threats. The boy, Luca, continued rocking, his counting growing faster, more desperate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Sir, I'm so sorry. Let me call," Marco started, but I was already moving. I set my tray down carefully, the sound deliberately soft, and lowered myself to the floor a few feet from the table. Not too close. Never too close during a meltdown. The expensive hardwood was cold against my knees through my thin uniform. "Hey," I said quietly, not looking directly at Luca, keeping my voice steady and low. 5 is a good number. My favorite number is 7. Prime numbers are the best, don't you think? The counting hitched, just slightly. I kept my gaze on the floor, tracing the grain of the wood with my finger. I like to count by 7s when things get too loud. 7, 14, 21, 28. "Want to try with me?" "Miss, you can't—" Marco's voice came from behind me, strangled and horrified, but someone must have stopped him because he went silent. Under the table, Luca's hand slowly lowered from his ears. I could feel multiple sets of eyes boring into my back, Marco's panic, the security guard's confusion, and something else. Something intense and calculating that I knew without looking belonged to Castellano. But I kept my focus on the boy, on the small fingers that were now visible, stimming against his legs in a pattern I recognized. "The restaurant's pretty loud tonight," I continued conversationally, still not looking at him directly. "All those people talking at once. It's like when you have 100 browser tabs open and they're all playing different sounds. Makes my brain feel fuzzy too." A tiny voice emerged from under the table. "Like static?" "Yeah." I smiled at the floor. "Exactly like static. Everything mixing together until it's just noise." "I hate noise," Luca whispered. "Me too," I admitted. "That's why I count. Or sometimes I trace patterns. Do you like patterns?" There was a long pause, and then slowly, so slowly, a small hand reached out from under the table. His fingers moved in a specific sequence, tapping against the floor. 1 tap, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. "Fibonacci sequence," I said softly, recognizing it immediately. "That's a really cool pattern." For the first time since I'd entered the room, I felt the shift in energy behind me, the dangerous stillness of predators reassessing a situation. But I couldn't think about that. Couldn't let myself acknowledge what I was doing or who I was doing it in front of. "Do you want to see something cool?" I asked Luca, keeping my voice gentle. "There's a corner over there, by the window. It's quieter, and I have a pen in my pocket. We could draw patterns while your dad finishes his meeting." I held my breath, waiting. This was the crucial moment, the point where trust either formed or shattered. "Will the light stay on?" Luca's voice was small, fragile. "Yes. Light stay on. Promise." Another pause, and then movement. Luca crawled out from under the table, his curly hair disheveled, his eyes avoiding everyone in the room. He was wearing a Star Wars t-shirt and jeans with holes in the knees, so different from the formal atmosphere of the restaurant. His face was tear-streaked, but his breathing was starting to even out. I stood slowly, keeping my movements predictable, and reached into my pocket for the pen I always carried. "Come on, let's sit in that corner right there." Luca looked up, not at me, but past me, seeking permission from someone. I felt more than saw Castellano nod, and then the boy's small hand slipped into mine. His skin was warm, his grip tight with residual anxiety. I led him to the corner by the window, far from the door and the noise of the main dining room, and we sat down on the floor. I started drawing spirals on a napkin, simple, repetitive patterns that I knew could be soothing. Behind us, I heard Marco's strangled whisper, "Sir, I apologize profusely for my employee's behavior. Leave us." Castellano's voice cut through the room like a blade, quiet but absolute. Footsteps retreated. The door closed softly, and then there was silence except for the sound of my pen scratching against paper and Luca's steadying breaths. I didn't look up when I heard the soft fall of expensive shoes on hardwood, when a presence lowered itself to the floor beside us. I could smell him now, sandalwood and something darker, like smoke and secrets. The scent made my pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with danger. "How did you know?" His voice was directly beside me now, low and controlled. But underneath the control was something raw, something almost desperate. I kept drawing, kept my eyes on the patterns. "My brother," I said simply. "He's autistic. High support needs. I grew up learning his language. Where is he now?" There was something careful in how he asked, as if the answer mattered more than small talk. "State facility," I whispered, my pen pausing for just a moment before continuing. I don't make enough to..." I didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't. Beside me, Luca started humming softly, his fingers tracing the patterns I'd drawn. And beside him, I felt Castellano's gaze burning into the side of my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." The answer came out before I could stop it, before I could remember that invisible girls didn't give their names to dangerous men. "Elena," he repeated, and the way he said it, slow, deliberate, like he was tasting each syllable, made something in my chest tighten. "You've made a mistake tonight." My hand stilled on the napkin. Fear flooded my system, cold and sharp. But then he continued, his voice dropping even lower, intimate and terrifying in its quiet intensity. "You've let me see you, and now I can't look away. I should have run. Every instinct I'd honed over years of staying small, staying invisible, screamed at me to make an excuse and disappear back into the safety of anonymity." But Luca's hand found mine again, his fingers wrapping around my thumb in a grip that was both trusting and desperate, and I found myself frozen between the boy's need and the dangerous heat of his father's attention. "I should get back to work," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "My manager works for me now." Castellano's response was matter-of-fact, delivered with the casual certainty of someone who could reshape reality with a phone call. As of 5 minutes ago, I bought his silence and his cooperation. "You'll experience no consequences for this interruption." I finally looked at him then, really looked at him, and immediately wished I hadn't. Up close, he was devastating in a way that had nothing to do with conventional attractiveness and everything to do with presence. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, and they held mine with an focus that felt almost physical, like he was cataloging every detail of my face, memorizing the exact shade of my exhaustion. "I don't understand," I said. "You will." He reached into his jacket, and I flinched instinctively before hating myself for it. But he only pulled out a business card, black with silver embossing that caught the light. "My son has never let a stranger touch him. Ever." Most people trigger immediate meltdowns. His therapists have to work for months to build even minimal rapport. I looked down at Luca, who was now adding to my pattern drawings, his humming steady and content. He just needed someone who understood. Exactly. Castellano placed the card on the napkin between us, his fingers brushing mine for a fraction of a second, enough to send electricity racing up my arm. "Which is why you're going to come work for me." The laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and slightly hysterical. "I'm a waitress. I don't think I'm qualified for whatever you... I need someone who speaks my son's language."